Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Joni, and today we're going to have some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further, let's go. Now let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. I met my wife 18 years ago, right after college. We were living in the same apartment building, and she was a few doors down from me. I would see her from time to time in the elevator, or while we were doing laundry at the same time in the basement. I always thought that she was cute, but I was a little nervous, and it took me a while to work up the courage to talk to her. She agreed to go out to dinner with me, and we have been together ever since. It didn't take long for me to realize that she was the one for me. I was ready to settle down almost as soon as I met her. After 2 years, we moved out of the apartment into a lovely home in the suburbs and got married. Not long after, we had our first child and our life truly began. The first few years that we were together, we were both working to keep the roof over our heads. I knew that wasn't ideal for us because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Unfortunately, at the time my job was pretty menial, and I wasn't making enough money to support all of us. After a few years, I got a pretty nice promotion, and with that came the ability to take care of my family alone. My wife quit her job, and we had never been happier. She was a fantastic mother and a great wife. I came home every day to a delicious dinner and clean, happy children. It was pretty much everything I could have wanted in my life. A few years ago, my wife's mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. At first, we would go visit her in her home and make sure she was okay. There was a home health aide who would go visit her a couple of times a week as well. Her condition progressed, and it was the right decision to move my mother-in-law into our home. My wife was home all day so she could make sure she was being taken care of properly. With her health insurance, she would have an aide coming as well. It was very exhausting for my wife after my mother-in-law moved in. Thankfully, we had a wonderful home health aide who would come and help her so she could take some time away. The first one we had was a young woman who was fresh out of school. After a while, it almost felt like she was a part of the family. We loved her, and she really seemed to care about my mother-in-law. Unfortunately, she ended up moving away when she got a better job offer a couple of hours away from us. The insurance agency sent over a new aide, and I wasn't particularly happy with the choice if I'm being honest. It was a young man who was working his way through physical therapy school. He was in his early 20s and in very good shape. On top of that, every time I would see him interacting with my wife, I would see her blushing and giggling like a schoolgirl. He was very friendly, borderline flirty at times. I had been with my wife for about 17 years at the time, so the thought of her cheating on me was non-existent. I figured my wife was just flattered by his demeanor. I was sure it was at the very least a confidence boost that the young man would be flirting with her. My wife looked very good. Yes, she had gained about 20 pounds over the years that I've known her, but she gave birth to 2 children and had also aged over time. She was still beautiful. The home health aide schedule had him coming over to our house twice a week. He usually stopped by around 11 or 12, early enough in the day that I rarely ever crossed paths with him. I saw him from time to time when I was working from home or stopping by for my lunch break. He had a lot of time at my house alone with my wife. I didn't really notice anything was off until I caught my wife in the act. In hindsight, there were a few signs here and there that maybe I should have caught on to. But I really never thought that my wife would cheat on me, so I was oblivious. I guess one of the big things that I recognize now is how my wife would occasionally ask me if I was coming home for lunch or not. Prior to that, I would sort of decide on a whim whether or not I wanted to go home or eat at my work cafeteria. If I went home, I just made a sandwich and relaxed in the dining room during the break. She would never ask me if I was coming home before. I would walk in the door and she would just be surprised to see me. Looking back, she would ask me very frequently on days that the health aide was coming over. Another thing is that she would be a little more particular about her makeup and what she was wearing on the days that he came over. Now at the time I did notice that, I just thought it was funny. Again, I never thought that she would cheat on me, so I thought it was just her trying to look nice so the cute young college student in her house would flirt with her. I didn't think there was anything wrong with a little harmless flirting. I see now I was wrong to think that. The aide was there to care for her sick mother. Carrying on an affair didn't seem like it would be a priority. Anyway, I found out about what was happening between them one afternoon and I decided to come home for lunch. It had been a very stressful day at work and I had a bit of a headache, so I wanted to close my eyes for a little while and alleviate that before the rest of the day. I drove home around noon and I saw that the health aide's car was in the parking lot. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I figured I would pop in and say hi to him, then go to my room. I walked in my front door and I saw my mother-in-law sitting in the living room watching a soap opera. The health aide was nowhere in sight. I asked her where everyone was, and she said that my wife was having a conversation with the aide in the dining room. Right away, my mind went into disaster mode. I still didn't assume there was anything internal happening there. I thought that if they were having a private conversation, it was an update about my mother-in-law's health. I walked over to our dining room right away to see what was going on. If there was something serious, I wanted to know. When I opened the door, I found my wife performing oral on the health aide. I was in complete shock. I just stared at them for a minute before anybody said anything. They didn't even notice me right away either. The health aide's eyes were closed, and when he opened them after a moment and saw me, he pushed my wife away. She quickly stood up and tried to explain what was happening, but I just walked away from her and to my office. As I was leaving, I heard the health aide practically begging me not to tell anybody about what happened. My wife followed me into my office and began profusely apologizing for what happened. She told me that it had just come over them and it just happened. She said she was sorry and that it would never happen again, and she begged me to forgive her. And I asked her if it was the first time that it happened. She told me no, and I could tell right away that it was a lie. She couldn't meet my eyes when she said it, and that was her biggest tell. I just shook my head and she realized she was caught and she confessed the truth. A few weeks after he started working there, they were alone in the living room after my mother-in-law had fallen asleep, and it just happened. Neither of them had premeditated it in any way. They were attracted to each other and they acted on impulse. Afterwards, they both agreed that they would never mention what happened to anyone because she didn't want to lose me and he didn't want to lose his job. They planned on pretending like it never happened, but the next time he was there they realized that they couldn't. They slept with each other again and they agreed that if it happened in the future, they just wouldn't say anything. It only ever happened in my house when he was supposed to be there taking care of my mother-in-law. They never messaged about it, they never spoke outside of his visits, and they never put any label on what was happening between them. It was just intimate. My wife tried to rationalize it as we're having needs that were getting fulfilled by him, but that was obviously bullshit because I was supposed to be the one doing that. If there was something she was unhappy with, she should have come to me. I told her that I needed time to think about everything and I packed a suitcase and left. I checked into a hotel room and I spent the weekend contemplating what I wanted to do. I had been with my wife for 18 years at that point, and I didn't know if it was even worth it to divorce. We had children together. What would divorce do to them? In the end, I didn't think that I could ever look at her the same way again. I ran through all the scenarios in my head and divorce was the only option for me. I did some research on divorce attorneys, and I found a really good one in my area that I set up an appointment with for the following week. I just couldn't stop thinking about how he begged me not to tell anyone about what he was doing. I wasn't just going to let that guy sleep with my wife and get away with it scotch-free. I ended up calling the agency that he worked for and telling them everything. From the way it seemed, he was very much on the clock while he was with my wife. Generally speaking, hooking up with the client on company time is a no-no. As for my wife, divorcing her was going to be punishment enough. It would force her to have to get a job to support herself and her mother. We didn't fully own our home, so she kept it in the divorce. There was no way she could afford the mortgage payments on her own. She'd have to move, and with the amount of financial stress she would have after all of it, I figured I would be a shoo-in for custody of the kids. Her entire life was going to be upended and ruined because she couldn't control her impulses around one person. She betrayed her marriage to somebody who loved her unconditionally and supported her. That would all just be the consequences of her own actions. We are now divorced, and she is living in a one-bedroom apartment with her mother. She comes and visits with our kids every weekend. She has a job as a receptionist at a towing company now. Everything she went to school for turned out to be pretty useless for her, because she'd been out of the job force for so long. I'm happy alone now. It's taken some time for me to adjust to being single again, but I'd rather be single than with a cheater. I gave 18 years of my life to her, and I honestly don't know if I will be ready to put myself back out there anytime soon.